Aloha, everybody. Welcome to Chuck Furuya Uncorked. You know, this is just a podcast of father, son, exploring...
Two different generations.
Exploring the world of wine and the pure enjoyment of wine. And we always, for every episode, we look to invite somebody who we think has something very profound to share in this arena. And joining us today is Mr. Dave Newman of Pint Jigger.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming, by the way. Please.
Yeah, so, Cully, in case you don't know, Dave is one of the top mixologists in Hawaii. I mean, he's up there. He's royalty. I have to bow every time he comes in the door. And so, Dave, you're from Los Angeles, California, right? And how did you get in the restaurant business there?
So I, like most people, when I was young, needed a job to help get my way through college and tried a few different things, and then immediately found out that I love the restaurant industry on my first job. I took a job with at an Italian restaurant called Ristorante Piatti's. They were up in Yountville, was their first location. They had about 17 locations.
They had one on Kauai at one time.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Nice.
They had 17 locations?
Yeah. So I was down just north of Los Angeles in Ventura County, and took a job there.
As what, a server?
A busboy.
Wow.
Yeah. And then quickly, it was a new restaurant, so I moved up to server. And then they had a catering department, and ended up getting behind the bar through the catering department because a bartender got in a car accident on the way to an event, and I lied and said I knew how to bartend. So at the time I was 19. First drink ordered was a Cuba Libre.
Oh.
I had no idea what was in it. And I got really upset when I asked the guy, and he's like, it's rum and Coke with a lime. Yeah. I'm like, why can't you just order it that way? So they quickly realized that I did not know how to bartend. So it took me a little while from there to get back behind the bar.
And then you ended up eventually at Nobu's Malibu?
Yeah, so bounced around a lot, traveled around, ended up at Nobu Malibu. I had been running a club in Hollywood, and then my dad had gotten ill with cancer. I needed a job where I wasn't working until 4:30 in the morning. And my friend was a bar manager over at Nobu in Malibu and happened to need somebody for the summer, and I ended up there for 3 years.
Was that when you bridged the gap into more mixology instead of like a turn and burn club kind of style bar?
Yeah, and I had always, and back then, especially Hollywood, Los Angeles, it was more about what you look like to be behind the bar in the best spots. I'm not that good looking, so I tried to make drinks taste a little bit better. So the line in front of my bar would be a little bit longer. So already the fact of trying to make drinks just taste a little bit better than the bartender next to me was a thing. And then when I got to Nobu, I was so spoiled because there was no bar costing. They were charging $16 for a drink back when everybody else was charging $10. So we could put anything we wanted into a drink. And a really good example is I made a cocktail with blood orange in it. And when the season finished, they were like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll just get them shipped up from Chile. I was like, really? Okay. So, yeah, we were really kind of allowed to do kind of craft.
To whatever you want to make, essentially. Yeah,
before it really became a thing. So we were using fresh lime and lemon juice before everybody was still using bottled sour mix.
So when you worked at Nobu's, or even before that, when was the first time you started thinking about hospitality and service as opposed to just making drinks?
So it actually came before that. I was super fortunate. The gentleman that I worked for at Piatti's had been bartending for 37 years. So he was like real old school, and he was just absolute stickler for that. So the service aspect the beginning of it came there, and then Nobu just elevated it to an absolutely next level. What the clientele was used to, it just became the absolute focus. And then, through the years, I've realized, if you ask any of the bartenders or industry people around Hawaii who's the best bartender in Hawaii, most of them are going to say Jonathan Schwalbenitz. He's been the day shift bartender at Murphy's for 25 years.
That's the bartender's bartender, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And he might not be making the best craft cocktail. He makes good drinks, but there is nobody who gives better hospitality on the island. So I literally make all of my staff that when we're training, we go have lunch at Murphy's and we just watch John do hospitality.
Well,
It's amazing.
that's really
I've never
interesting.
experienced that before or yet
Well,
either.
that is something you got to do. And having said that, when you work at a hotshot restaurant or something that's really glitzy and really, it's a place to be, kind of thing. I think people, yes, I think they really get into smiling properly and making, cordial and being gracious. But what separates you from a lot of the other bartenders and mixologists is you genuinely connect with people. You really, it's something on a different level. When did you know that was part of you, was so important in your craft?
So there's a couple things for that. The thing for me that really clicked was the fact that I just found out that I absolutely love being behind the bar. So when I walked into work, that was my happy place. It didn't feel like work. The other thing was the original bartender, Scotty McGregor, who was my mentor in the beginning.
At Noble.
This was at Piatti's. He told me, he's like, look, you can memorize everything about every bottle that's behind us on this back bar. If you know all that, it makes you one aspect of a good bartender. The problem with it is if you don't know much about anything else, you're forcing everybody to talk about what you love and what's your career. So read the front page of the paper at the very least every day, know who's in the playoffs, be able to speak to anybody about whatever they're interested in. And for me, that's just a simple part of hospitality that I think, unfortunately, has gotten lost.
Finding that middle ground of something to connect on in conversation with your guests, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so from Nobu's Malibu, then you did some body surfing.
So when I was much younger, I got sponsored bodyboarding, and then got to take a few trips out here, did some contests and some pictures, and fell in love with Hawaii. Was always trying to figure out how to get back here. And I've traveled all around the world. This is my favorite place. So when Nobu opened here in 2006, I transferred with the company.
And you came to open.
Came to open. They told me I was going to be the bar manager. They told another gentleman from New York he was going to be the bar manager. I got hit by a car, fractured my hip, broke some bones in my foot.
Oh.
So the decision was made. So I just kind of hung back, and after a year, they moved me up to run the bar program over there.
Oh, wow.
And that was like the industry spot. What was your guys' night? Sunday night?
Sunday night, I created an industry night over there. Everybody told me I was stupid. They're like, nobody's going to show up. And it just became the spot to go see all the homies. It was super fun. So I definitely miss those nights. Those were like when the people that are doing all the cool stuff were really, really getting going, like that second generation, like the younger post-Chuck generation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Abraham Lincoln was president, by the way, when I was in, I don't know if you know, did you know I opened a Waikiki Park Hotel?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I used to manage Le Maire Restaurant, and a group of us were sent across the street, and we opened a Waikiki Park Hotel, and where Nobu's it was called, first it was called the Park Terrace, and then it became the Park Cafe, and what we wanted to do was we wanted to be a restaurant like Roy's. This was before Roy's opened. And California fusion kind of foods, and a very progressive wine program was the Waikiki Park. That was a cool time for me.
That's awesome. And they just got some great recognition. I think they just won like best hotel in Waikiki, the new spot over there.
Wow, that's cool.
Julia Rigo, the GMO there, she's just amazing. Big wine drinker too.
Oh, good. So Nobu's, and then all of a sudden you decide you had an itching and you wanted to do your own place.
I had kind of seen where the craft beer thing was headed, and I wanted to just open a bar that would be really, really approachable, that would kind of take
neighborhood
and really just introduce that next level of cocktails to Hawaii.
Yeah, but Pint Jigger, you guys were craft cocktails, but you're also craft beers.
Craft beer.
Good food.
So, yeah, people say gastropub. We just wanted to do an elevated pub, really good food, and then craft beer was just really starting to get going, so the timing was really perfect.
Well, the other thing that, as an outsider, just hearing all people talk about your place, it was really also Dave Newman's hospitality, that people felt welcome. They just went there because it was, it was like going to Cheers, hey, Norm, it was that kind of thing, so it was expertise, but it was also hospitality. It was like this all cylinders kind of neighborhood restaurant that did everything well.
And you guys were kind of the first to start doing that. I forget who we were talking to on, maybe it was Chandra or something on a past episode, was crediting you with elevating, I mean, kind of being the pioneer,
She's too kind.
into
Chandra's a beast.
now that's becoming more and more of a thing. But you guys were kind of the first people to start doing that and elevating the scene.
I think for Hawaii, we kind of took what I had seen from other places through travels and tried to incorporate a lot of that. And then the one thing that we didn't see at the time, nobody did it. I hadn't seen a single restaurant do. It was very divided. It was either craft beer or craft cocktails. Nobody combined the two, and everybody thought it was a stupid idea. In my head, I was like, well, if I'm pouring a craft beer off of draft, it's only going to take me 15 seconds. If I can get 30% of our guests to spend 15 seconds making their drink, then I can produce a really nice craft cocktail for the rest of the guests in a timely manner. Because that's my biggest complaint. I was like, I don't want to wait 20 minutes for a drink. I actually like to drink. So, I think that's part of hospitality is making sure that people are comfortable right away, and being able to get a drink into somebody's hand for me is just absolutely key.
Well, and that's something that you talk about was what his point is when he goes into a place, he sees what he likes and what he doesn't like, and then embodies that into his concept, right?
Exactly.
You take away from what you don't want to wait for 20 minutes for a drink. So now that you have your own bar, you didn't want your guests to wait 20 minutes for a drink, and you found an ingenious way to get around that.
Yeah, and beyond just having the craft beer, we tried to do as many things as possible. We did cocktails on tap, so that's another 15-second cocktail. We did bottled cocktails. That's like a 4-second cocktail. And you have this amazing consistency of those drinks because they're batched. I made them. I put my hand on every single one of those cocktails that went out that was either batched through bottles or on tap, which is cool, like as the owner of a place, to actually be able to make every single one of those drinks for every guest that comes through the door.
So, Dave, your dream has come to fruition, right? I mean, really, you're able to affect all the different aspects, and you're a person who constantly tinkers to make sure, that you get as complete as possible as time goes on, rather than just sitting on your laurels and sitting still. Okay, so reflecting back on it all, what was like the first drink that you sat there going, wow, mixology, man. I mean, mixing something that's really like game-changing, eye-opening, something that...
This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So there's two. The first time I had an aviation cocktail, just absolutely blew my mind. It's gin, Luxardo, which is a bittersweet cherry liqueur, a little bit of creme de violette, lemon juice. And it's just like this elevated adult lemon drop. But it's so sophisticated, it's floral, it's not sweet. If it's made right, it's just mind-blowing. And that is the drink that absolutely made me want to make craft cocktails. And then I have another memory of sitting in front of Dave Power at Town, and he did a riff on El Diablo. It's normally a highball drink, ginger beer, tequila, and he changed it into an up drink where he had made a ginger syrup instead of using a ginger beer. And I just sat there and I'm just laughing like out loud. I'm sitting by myself and I'm just like, this is one of the best cocktails I've ever had in my life. And I think that camaraderie between like Chandra and Christian Self and Kyle, we just pushed each other so hard because we wanted to give that experience to each other. And then Dave's hospitality was also...
Where's Dave
ridiculous.
now?
He is now over at FET.
Wow.
And then they're working on a project for Waikiki, but obviously everything's on hold.
I thought you were talking about yourself in third person for a little bit.
Sometimes.
Initially, like...
Wow. Okay, so what was an aha beer moment for you that you had a craft beer and you sat there going, I got to explore this arena?
So and it's funny that you say that because now it like brings a lot of things full circle for me. There was a restaurant in Santa Monica. They now have two locations. The original one was on 14th and Montana. It's called Father's Office. They were known for their burger. But they were this first bar that I'd ever been to that just literally was like super focused on craft Belgian beer. And, back then, I think for me, craft beer was like a Newcastle. Like I thought I was really like up in my game when I was drinking Newcastle. And I remember going down there and I had a Sam Smith Nut Brown Ale on tap. And it just really opened my eyes to like how good a beer food pairing could be. I had it with their burger, which is legendary and absolutely opened my eyes. When we opened Pint, I had 5 partners, well, 4 partners and myself included, and one of the ways we decided if we were going to work together was we all went and made a list of bars that we really loved, and 3 of us had listed Father's Office.
Wow.
So it was pretty cool that, you know, all my 4 partners, all from Hawaii, had made their way to Santa Monica to try this little.
And that you guys all appreciated it,
Yeah.
and it made your list.
So it's pretty cool.
So, okay, so in terms of, you know, now we're talking, looking back, retro kind of stuff, right? Okay, so how have you changed in, first of all, you know, your approach to mixology, and second of all, your approach to craft beer? How do you evolve from, you know, the early stage? I remember, just to give you an idea, I remember you were talking about this, and I remember one time when I was like 22 years old or 23, I was so thrilled to drink a Saint-Emilion, you know, which is a red wine from Bordeaux. It's a red Bordeaux. And I was so like, you know.
So that's your comparison to like a Newcastle?
But it's worse. Actually, the Saint-Emilion, because it's just grapes from Saint-Emilion. You know, it's not a specific chateau or anything. And I was sold. And I remember my father one time, my uncle was a state senator. Another funny story. He and I was already kind of noted for wines. And my father was running my uncle's fundraiser. And he had a wine that he bought at the military exchange. And so, you know, you have the appellation like California. That means the grapes come from California. In the case of Saint-Emilion, comes from Saint-Emilion. If it's Santa Barbara, it's more specific, so you think it's higher quality. My father's wine that he bought said, the world. So he had grapes from Bulgaria, from whatever. So he thought he was happening, that he was being worldly, just like me thinking Saint-Emilion and everything. And now I look back on it, and it's kind of funny. So how are you looking back on how you've evolved in mixology of beer or beer?
So I think mine is definitely from my Nobu days. I pushed myself so hard to be able to present a drink that would live up to the food, because the food is so good. I mean, he's a world-class chef.
Right.
And so during that time, I wanted that bar lounge to not just be known for his food. So I wanted people to come down, and it was my goal to have people come in just for cocktails. So that really, really pushed myself to elevate my cocktails. And I think the one thing that I really realized during that time, more so than any other time, was that like sweetness is kind of the enemy for the majority of food pairings. There's some times when it's absolutely necessary and it works, but a lot of the times you can take away from what the chef is doing if your cocktail is too sweet.
You're not complimenting it, essentially.
Yeah. The aspect of balancing your cocktail just becomes incredibly important.
Can you kind of like just briefly walk us through what your process is on creating a cocktail? You know, so I bartend at my family's restaurant, and I'm always trying to be like, when am I going to get to the level where I can start making my own drinks? And what does your process look like? What do you take inspiration from, for example, and how do you go about starting from an idea to creating something that you are going to put on a menu?
So I'm fortunate that I'm older, and I got to come up through a time where we had to learn all of those terrible 80s, 90s, 70s drinks. But it gave us a foundation, at least. And I think you see a lot of bartenders that are just starting and I have trained so many, they're like, I want to do a bartender's choice and create something new. And I'm like, you can't make a daiquiri. Like
you don't know the classics.
You don't know the classics. Learn the classics, because almost every cocktail is going to be a spin-off of basically like 7 different drinks. So learn those. They say if you want to see if a chef knows how to cook, have them make an omelet, because there's nowhere to hide.
Exactly. Or scrambled eggs.
Like there's nowhere to hide. It's so simple. Make a daiquiri.
Soup or bread. That's how I judge restaurants. You know, you taste their soup, you taste their bread. You could see how detailed, what their
technique is, right?
Yeah. So for bartenders, I think the one to go to would be like a daiquiri. I mean, you're looking at rum, sugar, and citrus. There's nowhere to hide. If it's not balanced, if it doesn't have the right proportions, it's gonna stand out. So, and I even take it one step further when I'm training my guys. I'm like, you need to learn to make the best lemonade, because you need to waste my alcohol until you can at least do that. And if you can't balance citrus and sugar and water, we're going to have an issue. But you should also take the most pride in making the best lemonade on the island.
Exactly.
Because most bartenders, you ask for a lemonade, they're going to roll their eyes like if you ordered a hot tea. But just go ahead and crush it. Like, make the best lemonade possible. I used to spend my time making staff lemonades just to practice it. So
Is
I
that
think
something
that's
that you
key.
learned from your mentor on a way of thinking that way about something like a lemonade, or is that something that you've cultured on your own, you know?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I just like lemonade. It's really good. But no, it's definitely my mentor kind of instilled that in me. He taught me this. He's like, look, you're gonna memorize every drink that I teach you. You can put it on a flashcard. If I ever ask you one of the recipes and you don't know it, we're done. So every day that I worked, he would give me a new cocktail. I'll put it on the flashcard, and then he'd test me as we went along. And then he said, once I started making the drinks, he's like, look, every time you make a margarita, I want you to tweak it by 1/8 of an ounce of one of the ingredients. Keep tweaking it, straw taste it. Eventually, you're going to land on the recipe that you think is the best. What that allows you to do is confidently set it in front of people and say, like, at least for me, this is the best possible margarita I can make. So it gives you a confidence to, for one thing, train your palate, balance cocktails, and then also present the best possible product.
And what you
So-
like to say is always tinker.
Yeah. Well, see, the thing that's not being discussed right now, there's several things that we need to explore. First of all, if you're making a true daiquiri or margarita or whatever, are you using bottled stuff, or are you using fresh lime or lemon or citrus? So you cannot tell me every lemon is the same.
So there's
if
variables.
if you don't know what you're doing based upon the taste of that lemon, then your drink is not going to be balanced. It's no different with wines. That's why this is a very interesting tract, because with wines, every vintage is different. Every part of the vineyard is different. And if you're not good at understanding balance, you don't have the core of values, that's part of your core of values, how are you going to make a good bottle of wine every vintage where it changes? And so this is a very interesting track. The second thing I want to say is that's not being discussed. So he talked about lemonade and daiquiris, but the thing is, drinks to me, like wines, there's many different opportunities for them. It's a mood thing. It's a temperature thing, or ambient temperature. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. It's a lunch, dinner, picnic, what? It's
With
gathering
food
of
or without
friends.
food, yeah.
So there's all these other things. So, so the matrix gets even more complex, just like wines, in the fact that, you got to think, if you don't have a core of skills, is the bottom line, then how can you be truly a complete and, fulfill your promise kind of bartender? Dave, what do you think about that?
Absolutely, and I think the same thing is true with a bottle of wine. I mean, it's why do we decant certain wines? Why is it sometimes you open a bottle of wine when you've been traveling, and you're like, it tastes totally different. It has bottle shock. It's the same thing you said about the citrus. It's going to taste different from when I fresh press it at the beginning of the shift, and it absolutely transforms over the course of the shift. If you're not tasting your drinks as you go through the course of the shift, you're not going to be making the optimum cocktail.
And the other thing I want to address, since he brought it up, so there was this young lady chef from Roy's Restaurants on Maui, and staff meals, you use what you got left over, and you make a staff meal that's fills the belly and makes you smile and all that stuff, right? Her and this other lady chef from Roy's, they both took pride in making the best possible employee meal, as opposed to, I only got time to do this thing. Based upon what they had to work with, they felt if they could do that with that, then they're honing their skills. And so that's what he's saying about the lemonade and et cetera, et cetera. You got to be so good and complete, always playing game, not settling for less in all that you do. And it's not to say to use Petrosian caviar or beluga caviar or something. It's just with what you got. When limes are in season, fresh limes, you go with limes.
Or to take every opportunity as a learning lesson, essentially. Well, I think the most interesting, or not the most, but to me, what's resonating with everything that you're saying is stuff that you talk about, is the importance of having core value and fundamentals, and everything that you're saying right now, it's apparent that you've worked from the ground up, so you understand all the path along the way of how to develop someone, which is interesting.
And now I'm at the point where that's the most rewarding, enjoyable part of my job is to try to pass all of that on. I want to see more and more people, and that's why I try to give to our community as much as possible and not withhold knowledge or any of that. It's just, I want to see Hawaii food, wine, cocktail, beers just keep elevating. It's such an amazing place to live. Like, we should have some of the best restaurants. We should have some of the best cocktails. And honestly, we're pretty spoiled. We have a lot of concentration of talent in Hawaii. We're very, very fortunate. And
a legacy here too, right? From like Don the Beachcomber days to, you and Roy and Alan Wong days to now you and this generation that you're talking about days.
Well, again, we began this podcast and I said, I believe that this gentleman has a lot of profound things to share. And the bottom line that I'm not adding in here is that this guy's the real deal, and that's why he's here today. I want him to share all his wisdoms, his insights, his experiences, so that we can learn from it, so we can move forward. Not so much to be the best bartender only. That part is, the passion and everything, but it's also for the viewer that you understand the inner workings of the drinks, the beers, and how this master of the craft, masters his craft. And the thought process behind it all, and the selection process of it all. So he's just not offering this beer or this drink. He's not letting his people necessarily that aren't ready making the drink. He's trying to navigate all that stuff. So when you come in the Pint Jigger, you're awesome. And then the second thing is that Chandra, Justin Park, Kyle, there's a group of them that are this core, just like the Hawaii regional chefs were back in the late 80s, of Roy Allen, Sam Choi, Peter Merriman, etc. And they all got together also with the help of Nobu. Nobu was a big part of that thing from outside, Him and Roy were best friends and whatnot. But they formed a crew that changed Hawaii. It was a movement. It wasn't just, a group of chefs doing things. It was a complete movement because they were on all the islands. And that's what these guys are doing now with mixology. That's why I think it's very important to have him on the show.
I mean, you've been talking about Dave from the first week of Pint and Jigger opening. I remember you mentioning his name. I
totally respect Dave Newman, man. He is he's a gun. Just like Chandra, I think both of them are guns. There's so many even that kid, Christian Self, from Bevy.
Yeah.
Man, he did some drinks for us one time when we were opening a restaurant in Maui, and he came to help us. He wanted to show us these drinks. And I watched him work and how effortless, how precise, how clean he was. And the balance of his cocktails, but yet how simple they were made. It's only like 3 steps, 5 steps, not, with all these things and bells and whistles. I think he's really good,
and
too.
He's a really nice guy, too.
His hospitality is top notch. You'll never hear a bad word come out of Christian's mouth about anybody else, any other restaurant.
It's always positive.
Classy.
And no matter how busy Bevy's one of my favorite, but that's was my go-to for a long time. No matter how busy he is, he'll stop. If he recognizes you, stop to give you his a few minutes of his time, and he'll remember something that you talked about the last time you're in, even if it was 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Well, I think skill is one thing, and that comes from work and putting your time in. Hospitality, that's the part where a lot of people forget. When you start thinking you're the cool guy and you start holding bottles like this or whatever and flipping them and all. I mean, that's part of a show. Yes, I'm not taking away from that, but I mean the things that I would try to perfect is the technical skills, the knowledge skills, and as more importantly, hospitality skills, just like what we've talked with all these young sommeliers and everything. I think it's all very important. In addition to that, Dave, I want to segue into this conversation that Ariana was talking about, you doing something with indigenous foods.
Yeah, so...
That's Ariana over there. You can't see her off screen, but she's the boss.
Hi, boss.
She's our set manager today.
Exactly.
So good. I got invited...
Hey, come here. Come here. Sit right here. Come here. Hurry up.
I have another microphone.
No. She and I will share a mic. Come on, let's go.
Welcome to the party.
Let me just plug another one in.
No, we're good. We're good.
Go ahead.
Recently got invited to an indigenous food class by my old chef, Lindsay Ozawa, who was the opening exec chef for Nobu. He went on to do a bunch of really cool stuff like Prima and the whole ox and the melt food truck. He's just an awesome guy. He turned into a farmer. He's taking a little break, getting in touch with his roots, and invited me and had me put out the word to a few other bartenders. But tons of the guys from town, Mud and Water, Super Redder, and 20 people. Every week we do a 2-hour Zoom class on a new 1 or 2 indigenous foods. And then on Tuesday we go out to the farm, we go out to Haia, and we pick up foods. They give us the food for free. We've done some really amazing ingredients. We've done Samoan crab, we've done ulu and kalo, and we got a real nice barracuda to break down.
Oh.
Over the course of the week, we got to take what we learn and prepare a dish for ourselves. And then make a post on social media, and then come back the next week and discuss what we made. And now the course is coming to the end. It's been 7 weeks. They actually pay us to be in the course. We get $144 a week, which is amazing during this time. They got a grant, and I thought it was just genius, their idea, because in a year from now, you're going to be seeing more of these ingredients on restaurant menus, going into cocktails. For example, I took the ulu. There's a Mexican pineapple drink, fermented drink called tapache. And you just take the skin of the pineapple. It has natural enzymes and yeast and bacteria on it. You add piloncillo, which is a Mexican cone brown sugar, and some seasonings that you like cinnamon or star anise, some water, and you put it in a dark place, and it starts to ferment on its own. And you get this amazing free hooch. It's got a nice ginger flavor to it. It's really a good summer drink, incredibly popular in Mexico. I wanted to see if ulu had the same characteristics, so I did the same thing with the ulu skins. You don't actually use the meat, just the skin. It came out amazing. It's way more citrus forward, which is crazy because there's no citrus in it.
Yeah. It's starchy more so. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just absolutely delicious. And I'm like, this is great. We can take a product that was going to be thrown away and actually make something really interesting and cool out of it. The other thing is they have mangroves that they're invasive, that they're tearing down. So they gave us a bunch of the mangrove wood, and we started smoking cocktails with it. Super fun, absolutely delicious.
And how does that come out?
So good.
Really?
The Chiave is a really, really powerful smoke, which is nice for holding up to like whiskeys and stuff. But if you want like a lighter smoke for something else, maybe an aperitif or a gin-based cocktail or a vodka cocktail, it just imparts this really subtle, super tasty flavor.
Do you think that's the future of Hawaii cocktail culture, is using these indigenous ingredients?
I'm hopeful. I think that we have the most amazing bounty of seasonal fruits, and we can grow so many amazing things here. Obviously, coffee is already huge, but we have a friend, Sarah. She was working up at Encore. You can follow her on Instagram. It's Foraging for Cocktails. But she's out there foraging and finding really, really amazing ingredients and making syrups and tonics out of it.
Wow.
It's just a matter of time before it spins into a business. But I just got like a mountain apple shrub from her. It's amazing.
Oh, that's so dope. I have a quick question, actually. So what is your philosophy, or how do you take on tiki culture? Because I love Hawaii and I love being in Waikiki because of the hospitality. But do you think we need to pay more attention to the tradition of those tiki culture, or do you want to innovate, or just what are your ideas on that?
Because that was the legacy from where,
how many Mai Tais we sell and all those types of things, pina colada, etc.
I think we should embrace it. I think, unfortunately, there's no reason for the hotels in Waikiki to not sell the $16 kind of garbage Mai Tai. Because that's what people's expectations are, and it doesn't make sense business wise to go beyond that, which is unfortunate because that's going to be how people view our cocktail culture. Tiki is amazing if made properly. We had Mina Bird open. They're doing a really good job, and Skull and Crown downtown and make some really nice tiki drinks. But I think it's just something that needs to be embraced and moving away from the bastardized versions that we've unfortunately proliferated.
That's a good question.
So, I want to come back to that, but okay, well, maybe I'll ask you anyway first. One of the things that we have to understand, with when you have large volume places or, people that's been working a long time, it's easier to make those kind of drinks because each of the ingredients are standardized. It's not a fresh lemon. It's not a fresh pineapple. You know, it's all measurable, right? So, you know, and then who's to say that, you know, all your bartenders are going to be able to produce? So I think it's kind of like wine. You know, there is a level of correct wines that fills a niche. For those people that are looking to pound or just, you know, not think about it, they don't care about it, it's consistent, every glass is the same, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the specialty, the boutique people that make something truly special, et cetera, you know. So I think it applies to drinks. I think it applies to beer. There's always a time just to down a Coors Light or something like that after a hot day in the ocean, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you really want to enjoy and explore the world of beers, there's all this opportunity to get into these things. And if you look at it from the purity standpoint of view, you have a coffee-infused ale. What does coffee have to do with beer? You know, so there's all these questions. It's not just, there's a lot of different questions about it. And the point is, after all is said and done, there's an opportunity for all of the above. You know, whether it's tiki drinks that done, you know, commercial style or whatever, there's an opportunity, and there's customers out there that can enjoy each of those things. So you layer your thing. If you are a Pint Jigger, that's not the direction you're going to go. You're there to see Dave Newman mixology, you know, Dave Newman's selection of beers, and, you know, they're wonderful food, right? And so
that was one of my favorite things about Pint Jigger, though, was the food. Just
Thank you.
FYI, it was really good.
Thank you. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a time and a place to drink everything. You know, I pick on these guys every once in a while, but I always say, like, you know, give me a bottle of Behringer White Zinfandel, put me in a hot tub with 4 co-eds, and we're gonna crush it. But the same thing is true. I mean, my guilty pleasure, you know, when I go to the neighbor island, is to sit by the pool and drink a pina colada. Like, I feel, it makes me feel like I'm on vacation. I get it. And
it's a comfort zone. So, Kelly, the other thing I wanted to mention, I was going to take a sidetrack, is that's why, you know, the radia, when that thing is in season, radia is a small yellow fruit. It's got a big pit, so you can't really crush it. You can't really muddle it. But you can softly muddle it to get out the citrus flavor, because it's high in vitamin C, and it's high in a different kind of acidity, and use that as a flavoring. You know, I keep telling you should play with that and make different things, and make a syrup or make something that can accent a drink,
like
while
Polha
it's in season.
berries are coming back now.
so good.
So good. That was my childhood, was when we always used to go to Pineapple Room and stuff, and Alan Wong had his market or whatever. They were filming something, and I remember sitting on this table whacking Polha berries, and for like 10 years I could never find them. But now they're coming back in fashion.
Yeah. Okay. So, by the way, everybody, this is Ariana Suchia. She's one of the young
Gram Sam.
Gram-sam.
Can we drink wine right now, by the way?
Yeah. Here, pour that one. And you use this glass here. Okay. So the other thing I want to say, ask you before we get into this wine, Dave, is that you are well versed in 3 of the major arenas when it comes to alcohol enjoyment. So one of them is mixology, of course, drinks. One is beer. And the other that people don't know is that you also really enjoy wine. So maybe you can elaborate on this. So when is it a mood thing that you're going to drink something with alcohol? Is it, or beer, or what's
when
the
is it
opportunities?
appropriate for you? Yeah.
So again, like I said, there's a time and a place to drink everything. The last thing I want to do when I finish this shift is go home and make another cocktail. But I love to come home and have a glass of wine and you know, to unwind at the end of a shift. You know, right at the end of the shift when we're all together, it's probably going to be a beer and a shot when I get home. I'm a huge fan of bubbles. I love drinking champagne. I love the pairing aspect that it pairs with virtually everything. And then there's something really special about wine versus cocktails that I like to share that not that many people I think even think about. For me, the amazing aspect of wine is that when you go out for cocktails, everybody orders whatever they think that they're going to enjoy personally the most. But with a bottle of wine, we're ordering something for everybody to have that communal experience, which to me is a special aspect of wine that you don't really get with cocktails. I mean, occasionally Obviously, like the shot thing, everybody will rip a shot of Jameson. It's not quite the same.
Or Fernet.
Or Fernet. But, you know, you're having a dish and you find that perfect wine that pairs incredibly well, and everybody gets to share that exact experience. Our taste buds are all a little bit different, but we're much closer to enjoying something together, which I think is absolutely amazing. My mentor taught me, you know, he's like, look, the more time and effort that you put into your wine knowledge, he's like, honestly, you're going to make more money in your career as a bartender. You're going to have a richer life. It's going to be more enjoyable. And you're going to spend more money at dinner. So, but I love it. It's definitely, it was a little sad. I tried to create, I thought like, oh, we'll have the trifecta of the cocktails, spirits, and beer and wine at Pint Jigger, and it just fell on its face. People felt more comfortable drinking beer and cocktails there. So all the original wines that I purchased, I ended up just buying them from the business and taking them home. I think I started like we're going to do 3 rosés by the glass. We're going to have a Gewurz, and it just didn't work. And that's like a lesson of business. Is like you have this idea in your head of what your business is going to be. And I think if you're smart and you actually listen to your guests, you're going to tweak your business to what they want to enjoy. I mean, I'm not creating the bar for me. I'm creating the bar for the community.
And what about, like, do you ever experiment with wine cocktails, like a spin-off of Aperol Spritz or anything champagne-based drinks?
Absolutely. I lived briefly in Spain, so sangria is huge in the repertoire. I love one of the most popular. This is kind of a funny story. I'll share it with you about Nobu. One of the best pastry chefs on the island, Rachel Morai, was our pastry chef at Nobu. When she first started drinking there, she liked sweeter drinks. And we were changing the Cabernet on the list, so all the distributors came. So I think I had like 16 bottles of open Cabernet. So when she came in on a Sunday night at industry night, she's like, just make me something sweet. I was like, use what you have. So I had all this open Cab. So I mixed that with a nice French peach liqueur, a little bit of Calpico concentrate, shook that up and added champagne to it and put it in a champagne flute. It was like a sparkling sangria. She's like, this is my favorite drink. You have to let me name it. I was like, sure, Rachel, I'm never going to make it again, so I don't really care. Name it whatever you want. She's like, Ria, R-I-A. And I was like, that's terrible. Sounds like diarrhea. And she's like, it's my Instagram like nickname. And for the longest time, I didn't know what it meant. And the drink got so popular, ended up on the menu, R-I-A. And then finally I was like, Rachel, I just realized that your last name is Marai. What does RIA stand for? And she's like, oh, Rachel is awesome. So she had her own drink on Nobu menu. Rachel is awesome. But,
inside joke for just herself.
Yes. But I love playing with aperitifs, wine-based or fortified wine-based for sure. I think sherry, I mean, obviously, like I said, I lived in southern Spain. The climate is so similar to Hawaii. It's nice to see that it's starting to pop up a little bit. It'll be nicer when we get a little bit larger selection. But that's going to be a while for people to catch on. It's always like the industry bar people who start drinking stuff, and then it kind of trickles down.
Well, I think, because I was bringing in all these really cool sherries. The issue with sherry is it has a shelf life, especially when the bottle is cracked. So to have fresh sherry here in Hawaii, and most of them are not served at the right temperature. They're either left in the reefer or they're, so. And the other thing is that we get mostly commercial sherry here. And the other thing about sherry that needs to be considered, it's high octane. I mean, it's alcoholic, so it's not for everybody. Maybe that's something you could drink on the rocks. And big rocks, not something that's not going to melt so quickly. You don't want it to dilute the flavor of the sherry, but it just cools it down so that the alcohol gets tempered. I think that might be interesting. But Dave, let's move along here. And then you brought an interesting wine here. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
I think that's your
and
job.
why you brought it.
It's your job. I just brought this. It's a wine that I discovered years back in San Francisco and didn't see in Hawaii. And then was dining at Livestock Tavern, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago. And they had it on the list, and we were super excited. We drank a few bottles. But
what is it, first of all?
So the Dr. Konstantin Frank, Finger Lakes Dry Riesling.
New York.
So upstate New York. I don't know too much about it. I know that that Dr. Konstantin was instrumental in kind of moving towards rootstock versus, which allowed like a lot of different European varietals to be grown in the colder regions of the United States. I just love it. It's mineral forward. It's dry. It's a great food wine. Super reasonable.
So, I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that, but you don't. How many people are going to recommend a wine from Finger Lakes? Number one. Number two, how many people are going to? Don't you find it interesting that he wanted to showcase a Riesling? So
And talked about it being food friendly as well.
Why? Well, I mean, why do you like Riesling? I mean, so just so everybody understands, Riesling can be made, like all wines, can be made dry, medium, sweet, dessert. It depends on what the winemaker wants to do. So if you hear the word Riesling, the knee-jerk reaction for many people is, oh, I don't like sweet wine. Well, this is a dry Riesling. Okay, and why do you like Riesling?
I like it for the reasons you just said. It runs the gamut from dry to sweet. So you can find a Riesling to go with an incredible amount of food, incredible amount of moods. And then I love the drier Rieslings that just have that bracing acidity and minerality. Beautiful color to them. I mean, look at this wine. It's
like a gem in the glass, really.
But the thing about Riesling, it has, like I told you before, it has rounder edges than like Sauvignon Blanc or Chenin Blanc or some of these other grapes. So when he said food friendly, that's a real reason why.
Yeah, we used to serve this back in the day when I was at Alan Wong's. Mark Shishido used to bring
This
Dr.
wine?
Konstantin Frank in, and it was a learning wine for me. First of all, when you think about Finger Lakes, Dr. Konstantin Frank is a huge icon, but also just in general championing Riesling, especially in the U.S., because everyone's just like Germany, which is great, but it was really cool to see something stateside. And also just that citrus on this is just like so refreshing. Oh my goodness.
And what would you pay for?
This is under $20.
Oh.
And let me also say this. He talked about it briefly. Up in New York, you saw a lot of Vitis Lambrusca, which is the native vine to America. Vitis Lambrusca. The vine that we're more familiar with is Vitis vinifera. That's Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Chardonnay, Riesling, etc. So that's what he was talking about up there in New York. Here's this guy back in the 50s, I think. He decided to really go big with Vitis vinifera, which is the Vitis Lambrusco can make good wines, but it's got this foxy character. It's not so. That's why you don't see it too often. It's not growing in popularity, and more people, especially with the warming of the planet, are trying to grow Vitis vinifera because they feel it makes more interesting wines, but also it's more easily sellable. So this was one of the pioneer guys of really bringing the Finger Lakes and their wines to the forefront.
That's what I was talking about, but I didn't know it.
Dr. Konstantin Frank has a cool story too, so people should look him up. Let's be frank. Look him up. He's cool.
Well, what does it say?
Well, I'm going to butcher it, but it was basically like he immigrated from Europe and he was just working he's a doctor, but he was just working as a day job to get by up in upstate New York. But he really, really believed in championing the vines, and he worked his way from the ground up, basically persuading people, I swear Riesling will work here. And he's the one who made it happen.
Is it pretty similar in climate to Germany, upstate New York?
Nope. And also, the soil is very different. Germany, you have to remember, pre-warming of the planet, Germany would ripen a vintage of Riesling only 2 or 3 out of every 10. So it was very marginal. Imagine having a bar or a restaurant that you're only open 2 or 3 nights a week. You ain't going to make it.
Jeez.
So the thing that saved Germany is a lot of those family owned their vineyards for a long time. So there was no mortgage involved. It was passed down through the generation. So after a while, though, the government savvied up and they started doing things more on the inheritance tax kind of thing. And that's ugly. That's an ugly topic that I don't want to get into. But having said that,
how many vintages ripen, or how many years out of 10 years ripen now?
Almost all. So that's an interesting segue for us right now as we move into the next wine. Okay, so can you down that, or can you grab that glass? So
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, Ariana.
Here, next wine.
Chuck, what do the vineyards do with unripened produce?
Okay, so the unripened produce is what they would do is some people would make verjus, which is in replacement of vinegar, but other people in Germany they would make blends of like that you saw, the blends of wines of different grapes and whatever that were palatable, like house table wine. And then what some people did, they would make sect, S-E-K-T. Sect is sparkling wine. And a lot of them would be naturally high in acidity because the Rieslings weren't ripe. And so that was some of the ways that they, they mitigated things. And so because of that, what the German government decided to do was they started experimenting with crosses. Crosses where Riesling was one of the parents, so it had nobility, but they crossed it with another grape that would ripen earlier. So the two most successful crosses, for me anyway, was Scheurebe and the other is Muller Thurgau. They're both named after the doctors that created them. So what we're going to taste now is the Muller Thurgau from Rudolf first in Franconia, Germany.
You see how I asked that question with perfect segue into the next one?
That was intentional.
It takes years of experience. Thank you, Chuck, for making me look good.
Stop your whining.
I love it.
Whining. Oh, Ariana just dug out, man.
No.
She's afraid she's gonna turn red.
I know, I didn't take
Oh.
the Pepsi. Asian glow.
Okay, so Cully, smell this wine. So, how does it compare to the last wine you had? Here, you, Ariana, you too. In aroma.
Way lighter in aroma.
In aroma, yeah. It's more delicate, right?
Yeah.
It's not so obvious.
Mhm.
Dave, would you agree?
Agreed.
Okay. So to
Even
me,
the color is lighter in color.
So that's Germany because it's much cooler than a lot of the other growing regions. So it takes longer to ripen, so you have lightness. You have minerality because this vineyard is all red sandstone. So this vineyard is, this gentleman, let me start off first by saying, first is the two big wine and food magazines in Germany is Michelin, and the other one's called Gomio. So Paul First was Gomio Winemaker of the Year in 2003. So that's a huge honor. So that's where this wine comes from. He only has 1 hectare of Muller Thurgau. The majority comes here to Hawaii. So 1 hectare.
Majority of his wines come here to Hawaii.
The majority of the Muller Thurgau,
Oh.
because we used to make one under CF for the longest time. So this is.
So what is this wine, first of all, or just to?
The grape variety is Muller Thurgau.
But what is the name of it?
First, Muller Thurgau
Mm.
from Franken, Germany. Okay, so how is this different in a taste than the last wine? Come on, Mr. Balanced Newman.
It just has this amazing mouthfeel, silkiness to it. The mid palate lingers a little bit, and then the finish is a lot longer. I'm getting like just a touch of that petrol that I love from some Rieslings and those style wines. And then that it just pops right at the end. It's really, really cool.
So one of the wines that Dave we were talking about was the Marchigliani Rosé from Corsica.
Which this is similar to.
Well, no, but we used it on a couple of podcasts already. So I was asking Dave. So that's why Dave brought this Riesling instead, right? And that's why I brought that Rosé instead. And he wanted to do a Riesling and maybe a Rosé. But the reason why I brought this wine, it's kind of similar to that Marchigliani, not in flavor and taste, but just in how effortlessly light it is on the palate, how ethereal it is. It's not apple, pineapple, pear at all. It's something about mineral, and it's like drinking a cloud. It's so light and weightless. That's what this wine has stylistically. That's why I brought it, was that to show him something that's a deviant, it's a descendant of, or it's a, I don't know what I guess it's a descendant of Riesling because it's crossed with another vine. And most Muller, don't go out there and buy all the Muller Thurgaus. This is the best one, period. And this one in a store I think was $25, so it's not super expensive.
Is this a wine that just is too, that you don't have to, like that Zoe
Yeah.
Skirets where
well,
you
it's
don't
more
necessarily have
serious.
to.
This thing is world class winemaking. You can see it's to make something like this. Oh my goodness! I mean, there's only one guy that can do this. You know, this is magic. You know, but I just wanted to show you something that that was kind of like Riesling-esque, but just a little different.
It's delicious. The acid at the end, it's just, I'm salivating. It's so good.
And then how long, Chuck, have you guys been bringing in first to Hawaii?
And were you the first to bring it in?
The first was the first. I'm appalled. His name is Paul. So I've been carrying the first wine. And interestingly, I should share this with you is that what Paul First is most famous for is Pinot Noir. So as tough as it is to ripen white grapes, can you imagine ripening Pinot Noir in Germany? And he is the best to me in Germany and one of the best in the world. That's what he's famous for. His Pinot Noirs are not cheap. And if you look on my Instagram, I posted a picture of one of the vineyards.
Recently, right?
Yeah, that's Schlossberg. That's in the town of Klingenberg. That's what he's most famous for. You know, that Pinot Noir is something, it's haunting. It is so ethereal like this, and it's so musky, and I don't know, it's haunting. That's the best word I can describe it. So that's what this guy excels at. I mean, Pinot Noir. Okay. Then the second thing I want to say, what was the question you asked me before I get to?
She asked you.
Just when did you first bring this into Hawaii and kind of why, thought process?
I started bringing the first wines because of the Pinot Noir. Because there was, like this wine, they were so light and weightless and ethereal. And so I would say late 80s. No, it had to be late 80s, something like that. I started bringing these wines. And back then, it was spotty that you couldn't buy a Pinot Noir from him every vintage. But I just thought this guy's wine was, you know, somebody that was singing a song like nobody else sang before. And it was somebody that you just sat there and you had chicken skin from the performance. You know, it's that kind of winemaker. So this is, so then I did some events with him over the years, very, very high profile wine and food events. And one of them, I asked him if we could collaborate on a wine together for our restaurants. So that would have been in the 2000s, early 2000s. And he said, yeah, sure, anything for you. And then I never heard back from him. And then 4 years later, the wine showed up. So that's why there is a limited amount of CF Muller Thurgau. And he allowed us to add a little blend of a different grape in there. And I can't remember which grape it is. But we made it for the DK restaurants. And you'll see the CF label on top. And it's called Eurasia because I wanted to advise people, get a picture of what kind of foods it was meant to go with. What was the opportunity? But this is, to me, like...
We started carrying that at Buzz's.
Which one?
The CF Riesling.
That's the Riesling. I was talking about the Muller Thurgau.
Oh.
That's different. So I had 3 CF wines from Germany, each one a former winemaker of the year. And one was dry, one was medium dry, one was slightly sweet. So that way it could cover the whole gambit with the Sansei foods. So that's different. So I hope I exposed you to something different. A different grape, a different...
so good.
Yeah. So the final wine, so as I mentioned to you, Dave mentioned to me Marchigliani from Corsica. And that wine is like drinking a cloud, as Kermit said, the importer. It's so light and weightless.
You're a fan of that, Dave? The Marchigliani?
Yeah, I think Ramel turned me on to it. Or maybe Fuqueta.
When was this?
This was about 6 years ago.
It would have been me. Because nobody else was getting the wine then. Nobody wanted the wine.
We were definitely at Vino.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was dining.
This has a similar color to it, too.
Well,
Marchigliani looks like a gemstone in a wine glass to me. That color is so beautiful, and this is similar.
So, Mark, the whole thing about Marchigliani, I'm not trying to take credit from Marchigliani, but it's just nobody knew it, you know. So if it was 6 years ago, you know, Rick Lilly here, with the second wave, he was on it, and Chris Ramelb and Fuqueta, but Vino, the first 2 vintages was just solely us, and the way it works, Dave, just to let you know, I don't try to monopolize things, but if I special order something, so if the distributor is doing me a favor and bringing this wine in, I take whatever I ordered, and I just bring it in one time. That way, the distributor doesn't have to hold on to it, and it's just a guilt thing for me. I just don't want to. I don't want someone else,
Fronting the cost.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they have to run a business too and turn over inventory. So that's why it's not like I was trying to hog all the wine. It was just the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, in search of a rosé and thinking about a rosé for you, that was pretty. That was
What a bar trick right there.
Hey, Dave.
Years.
That was a moving experience. So anyway, so in thinking about a rosé that might be along the same lines, but in a more unpretentious, country-styled, delicious, slightly fizzy, wine that you would have at your lunch, your picnic, in lighter foods, That's why I thought of this wine. This is the Elvio Tintero Rosato, and this comes from the northwest part of Italy in the area called Piemonte. So it's therefore Barbera Dolcetto kind of driven, and a tiny bit of Nebbiolo, made like a white wine. So it's directly pressed and gently, so that you don't get the color and you don't get the tannins. And this is fizzy. So this was another special order wines from this family. Has been growing their grapes and making their wine since 1900. And Marco is the latest generation. So this is the Tintero Rosato. What's your thoughts, Ariana?
It's totally scrumptious and spritzy. Like the spritz was such a surprise.
Super
but in
surprise.
A good way. Yeah. And then you said the Barbera and Dolcetto. Is that kind of where like it has almost like a?
Does it say anything on the back?
I'm not sure, but it has like this really nice peach rose kind of
There's some Nebbiolo in there too.
aromatic to it, which is really cool. And Chuck, what would you prefer to pair this with if you had to pick one dream dish for this wine?
So for me, this is more about washing down the food. This kind of country cafe style wine is not meant for dissecting and analyzing, etc. It's just
It just is.
Yeah, if I had salads or I had pizzas or I had sausages with roasted peppers, things I could just gulp it down with. Cheers, talking story, getting loud in the afternoon, hanging out with your buddies, that's what this wine is. It's solely about pure enjoyment, this wine. Whereas the Muller Thurgau is very serious to me. It's very sophisticated. It's very like Nobu. He's talking about Nobu. Nobu his food is very sophisticated and quite. It's not culinary condominiums with things sticking out. It's very pure food, but very high class. And this wine would be more of a novelty kind of thing. It's also about pure enjoyment because it's so delicious, and you can have it with all kind of foods as well. But that wine is just so different. It's just meant for just gulping. Yeah, it's just for gulping. That's it.
Spritzy is a great way to describe it.
Yeah,
I'm going to jot that one down in my wine notebook of phrases.
I could see just crushing this. It was like brunch. You're outside. It's a little bit hotter than you want to be sitting outside, and you just
Hawaii
bring us
wine
another.
for sure.
Yeah.
Just bring us another bottle.
Yeah.
It matches your shirt, Cully.
That was the game plan. I'm in a rosé kind of mood,
It's like the haircut.
So Chuck, I got some questions.
Okay.
3 producers that aren't currently brought into Hawaii that you would like to see here.
Ooh.
3 producers. Well, okay. There's one producer that a tiny bit was brought in, but I think we need to get this in Hawaii. His name is Enrico Esu. E-S-U is his last name. So he's this guy down in southern tip of Sardinia, on the southern tip of Sardinia. His appellation is Carignano del Sulcis. So it's Carignano is the Carignan grape, which you see really happening now. I went to visit him. His winery is this large and maybe 2 wide. It used to be their family house, and that's where his father was born. And so I think his wine is totally invigorating and totally. I just really like his wine a lot. And those are, because the vineyard is sand. Sand is low nutrient and doesn't hold water. So you have this very different characteristic in the wine, a very different style of minerality. But the other thing is, when you have sand, you can have own-rooted as opposed to grafted vines. And so that's what makes that Carignan so special. His wine just moves me. It's not fancy. It'll never get 90 points or 100 points. It's just darn delicious, juicy. And so that's wine that we got a little bit of, and then COVID came and it just shut us down. And so I wrote to all these importers across the country to see if they would bring some in to the United States, because it's just a one-man show. He makes maybe 400 cases of wine at the most, at the most. So it's not like he has a lot to sell, but I would love to get that wine. Another wine I would like to get actually comes from the southern tip of Corsica. So if you look at Corsica, it's an island off the southern tip of France. It's right above Sardinia, as a matter of fact. And Corsica is mainly, when you start to north, head all the way south, it's mainly decomposing granite. So it's a dark soil, and when it breaks down, it becomes almost looking like sand. So there's different pockets of Corsica, but it's all granite based, and granite makes it more masculine, more savory, in my opinion, more hearty, more musky kind of thing. Well, in the southern tip of Corsica is the town called Bonifacio. Bonifacio is the southern tip, and you actually catch the ferry from Bonifacio to go to the northern part of Sardinia. So Bonifacio is limestone, and limestone is white, and it creates etherealness like that rosé. Like, it just creates this whole different kind of nuance of wine. And there's a small father and son winery there called Buzo Bonifacio, and they make this Murastello. It's a red wine that's somehow related. The vine is related to Mourvèdre. Oh, that wine just totally rang my bell. And I've been trying. I wrote to all these people to try to bring it in, and some people were gonna bring it in, and then the whole coronavirus has shut down everything. But that's another wine that immediately comes to mind, and it's just not available in the United States. Both of those, they're just small wineries. Those are two that immediately come to mind. And then we're just now starting to get the wines from Raul Pereira. He's from the northwest part of of Spain. And it took Warren Sean like 6.5, 7 years to get the wine in Hawaii. And those wines are finally coming here to the islands. Oh. So that's a pretty cool statement.
I think Warren should get more credit for how much he has done
absolutely.
on the spirits and wine side to bring in.
And beer.
Yeah.
He's totally in the beer, man. So that's good. Anyway, thank you, Ariana. David, as always, thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
That was super fun.
To all of you, thank you very much for viewing. We hope you had a good time. We hope you learned a thing or two. My jokes are better than Dave's. Everybody knows that now. And we hope you tune in next week. There'll be somebody else coming on. Until then, aloha, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers, you guys.
Cheers.